everything about him just gave me the ick. And I just love this. Like, what can I say? 5 stars. Hey, how's it going? Welcome back to my channel. My name is Gabby, and today we're gonna be doing a reading vlog. July has been so busy. I've been trying to work on 2 different reading vlogs simultaneously, and I kind of expected to have the other vlog done before this one, but that's not the way the cookie crumbled. No, I thought after Summerween, I thought that I had gotten past my reading slump, and I think I have, for the most part at least, but also like July has just been so busy. You know, I'm trying to balance working at the bookstore on top of all of my other YouTube things and just like general life things. And in today's video, I managed to read 4 books that I've been highly anticipating. But if you were wondering, I also did try to read so many other things for this video. I've also been DNFing a lot of things in the month of July, so I did get a decent chunk of the way into all of these books here. And I didn't even get a chance to talk about them in this vlog because like I don't really know if it's just like me right now or if it's these books specifically that I just wasn't really in the mood for. But these are some books that I started the first like 50-ish pages and I just wasn't vibing with it at the moment, but I might come back to these at some point in time. But for the books that you will see me read in this vlog, one of them is going to be Romantic Hero by Christy Greenwood. This is one of my most anticipated books of this year because this is from the same author as Love of My Afterlife, which is right behind me. Love of My Afterlife is a book that I read either last year or maybe the year before, but I absolutely loved this one, like way more than I was expecting to. So I've been really looking forward to Romantic Hero, and I've especially been looking forward to this one because in this story we're following this woman who is a romance novelist. She's a writer, and this is one of those stories where like one of her book characters ends up coming to life. And this guy is a fictional character. He's this cowboy that's named River Oakley, and he's kind of like the villain of her story. You know, I was a little bit nervous to read this because of the whole like cowboy love interest thing. I've been very vocal about the fact that I've never once in my life been attracted to a cowboy. Like that's just not really my thing when it comes to romance. But because I've loved this author in the past and because I do love the concept of this book, like I love the idea of her own book character coming to life, I just had a feeling that I was gonna love this one, so I did end up reading this book in this video. And then speaking of that book, I did end up reading this one that ended up being a little bit similar. It's this book called If Books Could Kill by Kate Eberly, and this one is actually a debut. And in this story, we're following this character named Roxy, and she ends up making this wish. She wishes to live out the plot of her favorite author's next novel because she's a really big fan of this romance author, and so she makes this wish like she wants to live out her next book. But it turns out that the romance author is actually writing a thriller as her next book. And so this book ends up kind of being like a thriller and a romance kind of a situation at the same time, which is exactly what I've been in the mood for this year. I also ended up reading this book called The Good Parts. This one actually has a different cover that I'm familiar with. I don't know why there's 2 different book covers. I don't know if it's a situation where like the publisher had different cover options, but I saw an ARC copy of this at my bookstore and I got really excited because this is a book that I've been really looking forward to. It just published at the very end of July. And this one genre-wise is kind of hard to pin down. I think it's like literary, but there's some romance and some magical realism elements as well because we're following these 2 characters, Landon and Rose, and there's a situation where Rose ends up taking this pill that makes her forget him. It says that she's undergone a radical memory erasing treatment, leaving behind her grief, her past, and him. I've heard a lot of people describe this as being perfect for fans of Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and it just really sounded like something that I was gonna love, so I ended up reading this one. And then lastly, I also ended up reading Long Island Girls by Gabrielle Korn. If this name sounds familiar to you, it's because this author has previously written some sci-fi books like Yours for the Taking, which is one that I really enjoyed. And so I was so excited when I found out that this author was gonna have this book coming out. And this book is actually not a sci-fi, it's actually like more of like a literary fiction that's kind of about this like sapphic romance that takes place over decades. So this one's actually taking place in the early 2000s and it takes place in New York. And we're following these young teenage girls who are really passionate about music. It just sounds like it's gonna be absolutely my vibe, and this is definitely one of my most anticipated books of this year, so I hope that I love it. All right, so those are the 4 books that I'll be reading in today's video. Let me send you back to when I started reading the first thing.
And you said it won't hurt.
is now like 2:30 in the afternoon. It has been a few hours. I just came down here to the park this morning and I've started reading Romantic Hero by Christy Greenwood. And I wanted to update you sooner because I'm actually already 244 pages into this. I just did not have an opportunity to update you while I was sitting in the park. Oh my god, it was so crowded. And every time I was like pulling out my camera to do an update, then of course there would be like a screaming child that would like come and sit right next to me. So I didn't get the chance to update you sooner, but I have been loving this book so much so far. And I'm actually really surprised to be loving this one as much as I am, because in this story, the love interest is this guy named River Oakley, and he's actually like a villainous cowboy. I don't think I've ever been attracted to a cowboy in like my entire life, but I do think the reason this book is working so much for me is because we're actually following this woman named Gertie, and she is a romance writer, and she's recently been broken up with by this guy named Henry, who is kind of like a total D-bag. He's also a writer, and Gertie is also an incredibly relatable character to me, not only because of the fact that she's like a writer and that she loves romance, but also because she had this sister named Jo who passed away actually, and it was a sister that she was really, really close to. So like in some ways, this book is kind of reminding me of Voicemails for Isabel, just because like I recently saw that movie and there was kind of like a similar sister storyline happening. But I just love Gertie's character so much, and like the premise for this book is that one night she does this like manifestation thing where she's like wishing that she could get Henry back, and then the next day she ends up finding this guy, River Oakley, in her living room, asleep on her couch, and she's like, what the fuck, like who is this? And it turns out that this guy, River Oakley, is actually like one of her book characters come to life. And she's like confused because she's like, what? Like he's not even the main character. Like he's a side character. He's like the villainous cowboy character who's like the brother of the protagonist that she writes the story about. And this book has been so funny. Like, oh my god, there was one scene that I actually laughed out loud while I was reading it, which like rarely ever happens for me in books. And I was like laughing for like a few minutes afterwards, just like imagining this scenario in my head. Like it was so genuinely funny. And like there is something about Christy Greenwood's writing style. Like she is so good at writing a true rom-com where like the romance is really good, but then also like the comedy is so funny. Like her comedic timing with the writing, it's just so funny to imagine these characters getting put in this scenario. And I think this book is working for me so much because I do tend to love that trope recently of like a book character coming to life. I feel like that trend has been really popular in books lately, where I've been seeing it in so many books, and I feel like this one has to be like one of the best because I do love that trope of like what happens when a book character comes to life. I think that's a very fun trope to write about because I am a really big fan of like the fish out of water trope, where like you have a character who's coming into this world that like doesn't really understand everything about this world. I think that's really fun. But then also I think this book is working so much for me because we also have like the fake dating trope, because this guy River, he's starting to realize like, oh my gosh, maybe the manifestation brought him here because he's supposed to make her ex-boyfriend Henry jealous. Dude, I just love River's character. Like I wasn't sure how I was gonna feel about him, you know, because once again, cowboys just really like are not my thing. But like this guy is so freaking funny. Oh my god, like he has so many lines where I'm just like cracking up, and I just love his like over the top kind of like flirty personality and the way that he's so confident with her, but the way that he's trying to like help her boost her own confidence. It's just really nice. And you know how I do often complain about like nicknames in romance novels? Like sometimes I find them to be so cheesy, but like the nickname that he gave her in this book, oh my god, it's so cute. Like it's absolutely taking me out. I just really love Gertie's character, to be honest, and I'm finding her to be very relatable. We're getting some really vulnerable scenes where she's like opening up about her sister and the way that her life ended, and it is just like really pulling on my heartstrings. You know, this guy River, like he was written to be like this villainous cowboy, and so of course she's like finding out that there's more layers to him than she was expecting, and that maybe he's not such a villain after all. And I do love that type of writing as well. The way that he's slowly like revealing more vulnerable parts of himself as they're getting to know each other, and like, oh my god, the way that this author has been writing the tension between them, like I was actually screaming over this one scene. I drove down here to the park. I actually brought a few other books with me, and I wasn't really planning to read this one today, but I just got the audiobook checked out from my library a few days ago, and I was like, you know what, like I'm in the mood for a romance today. I don't know if it's like the summertime, because I do tend to get more in the mood for romance books in the summer, but also like for this entire year, I feel like ever since like March, I've just been in such a mood to read romance books, and this one is going so incredibly well. Like I've been tabbing this book like crazy. I've been like writing in the margins, and this does feel like it's going to be a 5-star romance for me at this point. Like I am just loving these characters. It's just really making me smile, and it's like exactly the book that I needed to read today, unless this author just completely drops the ball in these last 100 pages, which I don't think is going to happen. I'm very excited about the idea of having a new 5-star favorite romance. Let's go! Okay, hi, it's almost 4:30 in the afternoon. I am home from the park. I took a quick shower to wash my hair because I felt like I really needed it. It's kind of hot today. It's like 82 degrees, and I know that doesn't sound like it's that hot, but like for Washington State, it's getting pretty toasty. But anyway, I just finished reading Romantic Hero, and I just loved this. Like, what can I say? 5 stars. And can I also just say that I thought it was so creative, the way that everything was handled with like the whole book character coming to life situation, because I was wondering like how all of that was going to get resolved, and I was really curious, and I feel like this author did such a good job. Like, it was so creative and so unique as to how this situation got resolved and like what ended up happening in the end, because I feel like sometimes that's where a story can really lose me, and especially if it has like a third act conflict that just kind of feels a little bit ridiculous. But in this case, all of it felt pretty realistic to me. You know, after reading this book, I'm starting to understand the obsession with girls being in like their cowboy era right now. Like, I'm starting to get it after reading about this character. This might be the first cowboy love interest that I've ever enjoyed in a book ever. He really is that kind of like typical male love interest that I do tend to enjoy. Okay, he's kind of giving like Damon Salvatore vibes. You know, he's the type of guy where he's like really rough around the edges. He's only soft for her because he's a villainous type of character, right? Like, he's this cowboy villainous man. And I just adored all of the ways that he was trying to like make her ex-boyfriend jealous, and the way that he kept commenting about how that guy was such a loser and that he wouldn't last a day on the farm where he was raised. It was just so cute. Like, he got so protective of her, and I loved how he was trying to like help her build confidence in herself. You know, because Gertie had kind of like jumped into this relationship with this guy Henry almost right after she lost her sister, and this author did such a good job with writing this man Henry to be so everything about him just gave me the ick. I just hated the way that he would just like use her so often, or he would just like casually try to like put her down in a way that was just very icky. And I so appreciated that this guy River was like calling him out on his bullshit. Wow, I was not expecting to have a new 5-star like favorite romance today, so like that is truly the best feeling in the world. Anyway, it's a Friday night right now, and the only thing I have planned for the rest of my night is that in about an hour and a half, I have a Patreon movie night coming up for the new Heartstopper movie, Heartstopper Forever. And like, oh my gosh, when I tell you that I am so excited, but also like terrified to watch this movie because I love Heartstopper so much. And like after this, it's gonna be over, like for real over. And earlier this month, I actually did end up reading Heartstopper Volume 6, and I loved it so much. Like, I thought it was so beautiful. And so I'm really curious to see this final movie, and I'm glad that I'm gonna be watching it with the friends on Patreon tonight because I feel like it might be an emotional one. But I think for dinner, I'm probably gonna end up making one of my Cook Unity dinners that I still have in the fridge. My favorite one is this grilled lime chicken. It's this one. I still have it right here. This one is without a doubt my favorite. Look at that. Oh my god, it's so good. There's this like corn salsa on the side, and honestly, like having the fresh lime like that makes such a huge difference in flavor. And these portions are huge. Like, do you see how big that is? God, I've just been loving Cook Unity lately. Like, I did have a sponsor with them earlier this month, and now I've ordered this 3 times. So I'm just gonna eat my chicken and try not to cry over Heartstopper, and I'll let you know when I start reading the next thing. Has been a few days since I last updated you. I've been working in the bookstore for the last 3 days, and I have been trying to read some things. I'm actually so bummed about this, but like the other day, I started reading Extracurricular while I was on my break at work, and this is one of my most anticipated books of the year, okay, because I love this author. The X-Talk is a book that I gave 5 stars, so I've been highly anticipating this romance book, especially because this book cover is one of my favorite book covers that I've ever seen. It's gorgeous, and I was really excited about the idea of this romance because it's this girl who's like a pop star, and it's a romance between her and this guy who's her college professor because she actually decides to like retire from being a pop star at a really young age because it's like not the life for her. So I thought it was gonna be like juicy and like fun and forbidden kind of because it's the professor, but I only got 30% of the way into this one, and like it was a hard DNF for me. Like, I am not vibing with this at all. I feel like sometimes when you start a romance book, you can just immediately get a vibe that like this is not the book for me. That's kind of how I was feeling about it. Like, both of the characters were like immediately bothering me so much. Like, I found both of them to be so annoying. And, like, the chemistry just wasn't there. I didn't like the writing in this at all. So, like, I am so devastated that I DNF'd this book. You have no idea. And then this morning, I did start reading the new Christina Lauren that's called Romance Revival. I've been kind of undecided if I wanted to read this one, but I was able to get the audiobook checked out from my library. So I started reading this one this morning, and I got about like 15% of the way through. I think I got about like 40 pages in, and I'm still kind of undecided if I want to read this one. I don't know. I think it's going to be a soft DNF for me for right now. I mean, the interesting thing about this one and what you might not expect is that there's actually a little bit more of like a sci-fi vibe to this than just like a romance, because we're actually following this woman who's like working in science that's going to be able to like bring people back to life or something. Like, I don't entirely understand what she's doing, but it's something like that. Like, she's working on a way to like revive bodies after they've died. And so this romance is about her and this guy named Luca, who she ends up meeting this one night when she's at her like best friend's wedding in Vegas. And after that one night at the wedding, it's almost kind of like a love at first sight kind of a situation, because they immediately kind of like fall in love with each other and they get married within a few months. And then the story flashes forward like 3 years later, and you're kind of reading about how she's like working on this new job and how she's getting the funding to do this project. And then the story is about how her husband dies, and then she's going to be using this program that she's working on to bring him back to life. You know, it's actually kind of crazy because I feel like this book cover, it looks like a fun, like summery romance, and I feel like this cover does not indicate that it's going to be like sci-fi at all. So it is kind of like throwing me off a little bit to have this book cover, but I just can't decide how I feel about the writing in this, because like parts of it I'm like, oh my god, like that is so beautifully written and I'm loving it. But then other parts of it I'm like, this is feeling so insta-love. The way that they just met and he was like instantly so down bad for her. It just wasn't exactly what I was in the mood for this morning, so I decided to temporarily DNF this one for now. But I am excited to let you know that instead of those other books, I decided to start reading this one called If Books Could Kill, and this book actually publishes today on the day that I'm filming this, which is perfect because I was able to download the audiobook on Spotify, and so I've been listening to that. I just hit chapter 14 in this book and I'm now 134 pages in, and so far this one is going pretty well. This one definitely piqued my interest right away because on Goodreads it says a novel love story meets Love in the Time of Serial Killers, which I was a really big fan of Love in the Time of Serial Killers, by the way. Like, that was a top favorite of mine, and I feel like this book kind of fits into that trend that I've been seeing a lot lately, where it's like you have these characters kind of like coming to life, or like some kind of fictional story that's coming to life, because we're following this character named Roxy, and right at the start of this she comes across this person who's like granting wishes. It's almost kind of like the horror movie Obsession in a way, where this person's like granting wishes, and so she makes this wish where she said, I wish I could be the protagonist of the next novel from this romance author that she really loves. And then her wish becomes a reality, and she thinks at first that she's in a romance novel and like everything's going so well, and then it actually turns out that this author is going to be writing a thriller next, and her romance completely goes sideways, and she finds herself on the run from this guy who's like trying to kill her. It's actually so funny because I was trying to understand like how this was going to work, and it was so cool because like the author actually made a post to her Instagram where she was like describing her next book and like what it was going to be about, and then she was like, I can't wait for you to meet Roxy Mitchell. And Roxy sees this post on Instagram and she's like, oh my god, because she's realizing that her life is the plot for this author's next novel, and she's currently writing it right now. So I do think this book has kind of a unique spin on that trope right now that's really popular with like a fictional story coming to life, but I do like that this still does feel like a good balance between being like a romance and a mystery thriller at the same time, because it's so funny because as she's like fleeing and like running from this guy who's a killer, she does end up meeting this other guy named Grant when she like accidentally gets into his Uber and like drives off, and he thinks that she's kidnapping him, and there's like a really funny exchange between them where he's like, oh my god, like please don't hurt me. And during that he kind of admits that like he's a writer and he always should have written books instead, and like he wasted so much time, and he talks about how he's a really big fan of crime novels. And then she like stops the car and she's like, you're a fan of crime novels? Like, you need to help me, because she's like, I only read romance, like I don't know what to expect from a crime novel. So it's kind of like silly, campy, stupid, because he's gonna be like helping her because he knows crime novels, and she's finding herself in the middle of a crime novel. So it does feel like there's a bit of a romance happening between her and this guy named Grant, which I think is very fun. Like, I am liking the way the romance is written between them, and there have been so many moments that made me like want to laugh out loud. Like, some of it is just so funny. I had to underline this one quote towards the beginning when she was talking about romance novels, because I thought this was so relatable, when she said, this is the common misconception about romance fans, that we're all lovelorn and miserable, desperately trying to make up for something that we lack. No one spins a penchant for other genres into some soul-defining dissatisfaction with life. Imagine if we looked at every Civil War nonfiction reading dad and went, how sad that he'll never know the thrill of being a sepia-toned man in a hat writing letters to dearest Martha. He must be so unfulfilled. Or told the diehard fantasy fans, you're just bitter because you wish you could be lording over all those rings or whatever. I just thought that was so funny and so true, because I feel like romance fans get a lot of criticism, like thinking that we're only reading romance because we lack it in our lives, when in reality, romance is as much of an escapism as any other genre. I also do love how like meta this book can be at times, and how like self-aware, because we have reached a point in the story where I was starting to get a little bit bored. Like, I'm not gonna lie, it's this part where they were bringing in this other character who I was like, you know, I don't really care about what's happening here, but it was actually funny. Like, it almost made me laugh out loud, because then there was a line where she said, I have to be honest, if I were reading this book I'm trapped in, I imagine I'd be skimming this part. And I was like, yeah, same. So I do like that at the very least it is kind of self-aware about the fact that it was getting a little bit boring for me in that part. I don't know, I am really liking the general vibes of this book. Like, this one is reminding me a lot of some other books that I've loved. Like, Man of My Dreams is one that comes to mind, because it is kind of similar to Man of My Dreams in the sense that it has that balance of like romance and thriller. It also kind of reminds me of like How to Kill a Guy in 10 Dates, because of that same like vibe where it kind of feels like a thriller and a romance at the same time. And it's also kind of reminding me a tiny bit of like the book Female Fantasy, just because some of the plot in this book is a little bit like over the top and like ridiculous, and like there's a lot of action scenes where they're like fighting people together. I mean, I don't know at this point, to be honest, if it feels like it's gonna be a 5-star for me. Like, it's feeling like a strong 4 so far, but I'm only like a third of the way through it, so like we'll have to see where the rest of this goes. It is so hot today, it's like 91 degrees, and yet all I want to do is like curl up under my blankets and blast the AC in my room and read in bed. So I think that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, hello, I am checking in with another update because it's now about like 4:20 in the afternoon, and I just finished reading If Books Could Kill, and I did really enjoy this book for the most part. However, my one complaint with this is that it does feel like it was just a little bit too long. I mean, this book is sitting at about like 350 pages, and at some point towards the end, like especially as I was nearing the end of the story, I was like, wow, this is starting to feel like it's just like 50 pages too long, maybe even like 80 pages too long, because there was definitely a point towards the second half of this book where some of the scenes were starting to feel repetitive, and I was just kind of like waiting for the plot to move forward. But with that being said, I actually thought the romance in this book was so freaking cute, and there were a lot of romance tropes in this that I was not expecting that I ended up loving so much. You know, like I was mentioning before, I really love how like meta this book is and how like self-aware this book is. Like, I thought that was really entertaining, and I really did love both Roxy and Grant as characters. Like, they definitely had their moments where they were making me like laugh out loud, but then they also had these like really beautiful, like touching moments. I thought the romance was developed in a really like realistic way too, because it was almost like one of those things where like it just creeps up on them and they don't even realize that they're catching feelings. But I also think one of the things that kind of like brought down my enjoyment with this book was kind of like the cheesy cartoon villain type of plot line. And because this book is like so self-aware, it actually does kind of touch on this. And like, I guess it works in terms of like the tone of the overall story, but I couldn't help but feel like I was like, ugh, like wanting to like roll my eyes or kind of like skim through those parts where like the villain would just have like their monologue. I'm surprised by this, but I actually think I ended up enjoying the romance in this story like so much more than the thriller elements. And if I could rate this book just based off of the romance alone, I think I would rate this higher. But I think because the story ended up feeling like it was dragged out a little bit too long, and like some of the action and like thrilling moments like just didn't really work for me as well, especially in the second half, I think I'm probably gonna give this like 3.5 stars. I'll definitely be reading more from this author in the future because I do really like her writing. And like, how cool is it that it seems like this year especially, I'm noticing that a lot of books are getting published that are both like romances and thrillers, or romances and horror books. And because those are like my favorite genres, like I am just so here for this. I actually think in the month of August, I think I'm gonna do a video that's like dedicated to horror romance books, because there are quite a bit that have been coming out recently, and there are a few coming out in the month of August that I'm really excited about. So I think really soon I would like to do a video that's gonna be dedicated entirely to reading some of the horror romances, because that is just so my jam lately. But anyway, I don't really know what I have going on for the rest of my night. I think me and my mom are gonna pick up something for dinner, probably just like fast food, and then we're gonna jump back into watching New Girl. We decided to put the X-Files on pause for now because We are still on season 1. We haven't finished season 1 yet. I think we're like 18 episodes into season 1 of the X-Files, but it's just been a little bit like slow moving. And I think because it's like the summertime, we just want to watch something that's a little bit more like silly and lighthearted. So we put the X-Files on pause for now, and instead we've been rewatching New Girl because my mom actually told me that she's never finished watching New Girl. Like she's never seen it all the way through. And I was like, no way, because New Girl is like one of my favorite shows, and it's also like one of my biggest comfort shows. And it's actually been a while since I've rewatched the show. And one of the reasons why I wanted to rewatch it now is because there's actually this nonfiction book called Who's That Girl that just published in the month of July. That's kind of like a behind the scenes of like New Girl and like learning more about the cast and like what was going on. And lately, those types of nonfiction books about some of my favorite shows are like my favorite thing to read ever. So I thought it would be really fun to like rewatch New Girl so that my memory is like really fresh, so that I can eventually read this nonfiction book that's talking about the show. I think that would be really fun. So we're probably gonna watch more New Girl, and I'll update you once I start reading the next book. Okay, hi, hello. I wanted to check in with this vlog because I have a reading update, because today I started reading The Good Parts and I'm about 100 pages into this one now. Gosh, tonight has been so crazy because not only was today like 95 degrees, it's been insanely hot here, but also because I've been working at this baseball game. I actually ended up working tonight because the bookstore where I work, they were gonna have a booth at this baseball game. And it was really cool because we had like a little spinner wheel that like kids could spin and they could like win prizes. So kids were winning like stickers or bubbles or candy or like discount coupons for our store, or even like free books. Like we did have some children's books that we were giving away, and like some ARC, like young adult ARC copies of books that we were giving away. So they asked if anyone at the bookstore could work at this table at the baseball game, and I was like, hell yeah, I'll work at the booth, because in my mind I was like, I'm gonna get paid to watch baseball. But then what I didn't realize is that today was gonna be 95 degrees. Like, oh my god, it was so hot. I mean, the good thing is that the booth where we were seated, we were actually like tucked behind this thing, so we were in the shade. But the bad news about where I was is that I wasn't able to watch the baseball game, like any of it. We were completely blocked. We were like on the other side of like the bleachers and like the seats, so like I could not see any of the baseball game, so that was kind of a bummer. But it ended up being a pretty good night regardless. But anyway, as I mentioned, I'm about 100 pages into The Good Parts, and so far I am really enjoying this. I'm liking the writing in this a lot. I'm actually kind of surprised that this one is a debut because the writing just has this like really great quality to it. It feels very lyrical, and like this is the kind of book that's gonna be like devastating, because in this story we're following these characters named Landon and Rose, and it is so interesting because the story's getting told in two different timelines. So in one timeline we're actually following from Rose's perspective, and we're getting flashbacks of her time in college, and we kind of get to see like how she first met Landon in the first place and like how she met her roommate. And that part of the book definitely feels more like a romance, but it also feels very like literary and like coming of age for her character. But then in the present day timeline we're actually getting Landon's point of view, because Rose has recently taken this pill, so like she doesn't remember him. I've heard a lot of people comparing this book to Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind. Is that what it's called? I don't know. I haven't actually seen that movie. I know it's been on my watch list forever and everybody tells me that I would love it, but I've never seen it. But I've seen a lot of people compare this book to that because I guess the idea is pretty similar, like the fact that she just wiped her memories of him and she doesn't know who he is. But he remembers who she is, and like he very much remembers their entire relationship, and he's like grieving their relationship. And it says now Rose's world is a blank canvas and she's dating someone new. When Landon re-enters her life as a stranger, they become fast friends, their lives intertwining once more. But what Rose doesn't know is that this new friend carries the weight of everything they once shared. And so he's like trying to come back into her life as a friend, because he's like, if she fell in love with me once, she'll do it again. And I was like, oh my god, I love that. Like, I am such a sucker for that. It kind of reminds me of like The Vow or something, you know, where she like loses her memory of him and then he's like, fuck it, I'm gonna make her fall in love with me all over again. Or like 50 First Dates. But I do think the tone of this book feels a lot more serious than those movies. This definitely doesn't feel like a romantic comedy. It's more of like a romantic drama kind of a vibe. But I am liking the dual timelines. I'm really liking getting her perspective in the past and then his perspective in the present day. And I think the writing in general in this has been really beautiful and like really moving so far. So I am pleasantly surprised. I'm enjoying it so far. Gosh, it's almost 9 o'clock at night. You know, here in Washington, the sun doesn't go down until like 9:30 or even close to like 10 o'clock at night. But the sun looks like it's just now starting to set, and it is so beautiful. It's like golden hour, or maybe it's blue hour by now. I don't know. Anyway, I'm probably going to be finishing up the rest of this book tomorrow because I do have some reading sprints scheduled for tomorrow afternoon on my Patreon, so I'm probably going to be finishing up this book then. Hello, how's it going? It is now the next afternoon. I have had a very busy and very productive day because I ended up filming a video earlier today. I edited that entire video, and then at 2 o'clock this afternoon, I started on some Patreon reading sprints so that I could finish the rest of this book, The Good Parts. And wow, you know, the second half of this book, I feel like I've had a really big change of heart when it comes to this story, because yesterday when I was updating you, I was really enjoying this story for the most part. I really liked the setup. I thought the writing was really beautiful, and I think the concept for this book is really unique and really fascinating. Like, I love the idea of a character taking a memory pill where it like affects her memories and like she doesn't remember him. But like, I really didn't care for the second half of this book very much, almost to the point where like I think I'm probably gonna give this like 2.5 stars. And I know I'm gonna have such an unpopular opinion when it comes to this book because everybody seems to be loving this, and it's not even necessarily like the fault of this book. I just didn't really care for what was happening in the second half of this. It almost kind of reminds me of like my experience when I read that book, This Book Made Me Think of You. It's like, I definitely understand why everybody's obsessed with this book and why everybody's loving it and everybody's crying over it and saying it's so emotional. Like, this book definitely hit a lot of those same like emotional beats that book did. But like, I don't know, I guess I'm just not that interested in reading these like emotionally devastating, sad, depressing books that like the only intention feels like it's made to make you cry. And I just didn't feel as connected to this couple as I thought I did, at least not with like the start of this. Like, I was really enjoying it at the start of this book, but then like the story just went on and on and on, and it was all so sad and so depressing. And I think part of the reason why this one didn't work for me too is because the chapters were so long, and so it made the pacing of this book feel really slow. I feel like such a downer though talking about this book because I can see a lot of people really loving this book, especially if you're looking for stories that are about, you know, like the hardships of family and like motherhood. Like, I think it was all handled very well. I don't know, I kind of feel the same way about this book too with like how I felt about The Burning Side earlier this year, where it's like these are literary books that are so loved and everybody's saying like, oh my god, like I sobbed and it was so beautiful and like they cried their eyes out, but like I just personally don't really see the hype with these books. And it's crazy because like maybe this book would have been like my exact reading taste like 5 to 7 years ago. I feel like I used to love books like this that are just like these sad literary books where you're just following this couple who's just like trying to get it right. But like these days, I honestly just get kind of bored by these storylines, and like I expected so much more, you know, because this one has such a unique premise where like she took this pill where she forgets who he is. I just kind of expected the story to go in a different direction, I guess, or I expected a little bit more from that side of the story, because I do feel like at the end of the day, this is just another one of those books where you're reading about a married couple who really loves each other, but they're really struggling and they're going through a lot of awful things and they're suffering endlessly, but they're so desperately trying to make it work. And there was just something about this that was so depressing to read. And these days, I am just less and less in the mood to read something like this. Most of the time these days, I'm just trying to like read for escapism because like the world is already so heavy enough as it is. Like, we can't even enjoy a salad this summer, you know, like things are bleak. And that's not necessarily like the book's fault. It's just really not what I was in the mood for. And so I am really bummed to be rating this book pretty low, especially because it started off pretty strong. But this is just one of those times where like I have to accept that this book is probably going to be so popular and everybody's probably going to love this. It's probably going to be on so many people's favorites of the year list. And I just have to accept that this is not the book for me. And that's okay. Hi, how's it going? It has been a while since the last time that I updated this vlog. I've also been working on 2 vlogs simultaneously, so like I don't even know what's going on anymore. July has been wild. It's been so busy. I feel like I've been reading a lot, but I've also been like DNFing a lot and just trying to figure out like what I'm in the mood for. Also, do you like my new black overalls? I've always wanted to get a pair of overalls, okay, and I just never have done it. But I think in my brain that I decided that I like the look of the black overalls more than like the blue denim or even like the white overalls. And I ended up buying these recently and they just came came in today. Like, are these not so cute? And these ones that I bought are actually from Quince, and they were only like $65. Like, honestly, not too bad. But anyway, I just got home from work, and I wanted to let you know that this morning I got a chance to start reading Long Island Girls by Gabrielle Korn. I was able to start this book this morning while I was like making my breakfast and eating breakfast here at the house. And then I also was able to read a little bit more while I was on my lunch break this afternoon. And now I'm 118 pages in, and oh my gosh, so far I am already really liking this. The writing in this is just so good. I swear, I think my reading for the month of July, like the mood of my reading has been sapphic yearning. Like, that is all that I want to read apparently in the month of July. And something that I love about this story is that it starts in 2005, and most of the story is taking place in the early 2000s, but it's also like spanning some decades here. So it starts in 2005. We're following this girl named Susan when she's like 17 years old, and she has this best friend who's like dating this boy, and so her best friend is like, why don't you go out with this other boy? And then there's this boy named Kyle, and she's like, why am I not interested in Kyle the way that I should be? And she's kind of like struggling, you know, like with her sexuality a little bit and like trying to figure things out. And in her mind, she's like, there's no way in hell that I'm a lesbian, because she has like an idea in her head about what a lesbian is supposed to be like. And she's like, that's not me, I'm not that. But then she can't figure out why she doesn't really like this boy. And not only is this book packed so far with like the early 2000s nostalgia, but there's also a lot of talk about music in this, because one of the first scenes in this book is all of these young teenagers going to see this band in New York. And when they go to this one concert, this boy, Kyle, that she like almost had a thing with, but like it never really went anywhere. Well, then Kyle, he ends up bringing this other girl named Eliza to the concert. And then when Susan sees Eliza, it's almost like one of those things where it's like love at first sight. Like, she sees Eliza and she's like, oh my God, like maybe I am interested in women. But she keeps like doubting herself the entire time and being like, no, like that's not what this is. I just love the way that this book has already been talking about music. One of the quotes when it said, Susan is not a musician, though at one point during freshman year, she half-heartedly tried to learn the drums. She's not a performer of any kind. She's never wanted to be on stage, but she loves music more than anything else in the world. It makes her bones vibrate like her body itself is a tuning fork, capable of resonating at the precise frequency of the emotions in the songs she plays on repeat. And I just love the way that it immediately kind of like describes this feeling that she gets when she's meeting Eliza, when she's first talking to her, when she says it feels like that moment right before the chorus when you finally understand what the melody has been building toward, like it deserves its own horn section. She doesn't know much, but she's pretty sure that if she doesn't kiss Eliza, she's gonna die. Every cell in her body has been turned on to a new frequency all at once, a radio station that plays only the sound of Eliza's voice. The way that the romance is like tied into the music and the love that she has for music, oh my God, it's just beautiful. But what's wild about this book is that something happens that separates them after that year of 2005, and then we kind of jump forward 5 years at a time, and we get to meet these characters again in 2010, and then 2015, and then eventually I'm guessing it's just going to keep jumping 5 years. And this story not only feels kind of like a literary, almost like coming of age story for this character Susan, but it's also kind of this like will they, won't they, slow burn, sapphic romance that's taking place over decades, where she meets Eliza again when she's older, and they kind of like talk about how their lives have changed and like what could have been. And I just feel like the yearning in this book has been written so well. I feel like if I had to compare this book to anything so far, it kind of feels like Yerba Buena, at least in the way that like the sapphic yearning is being written between these girls. But then it's kind of like Yerba Buena meets Deep Cuts, because of the way that music is being talked about in this book. It definitely reminds me a lot of Deep Cuts. And both of these books are books that I absolutely loved, by the way, some of my all-time favorites. So for me to even want to compare this to those, like it feels very promising. And so I really love when this kind of thing happens where I'm reading from an author who I have enjoyed before in a different genre, and kind of getting to see her take on like a literary kind of romantic story between these two girls. Like, this is just everything. I'm really enjoying it a lot. I might try to read a little bit more of this tonight before bed, but I'm most likely going to be finishing up the rest of this book tomorrow, so I will update you with my final thoughts once I'm done.
Every whisper sounds like goodbye. Still you are learning how to try. Don't look down, don't fall apart. You are stronger than you.
Okay, hi, hello. It is the next afternoon. I have spent the entire morning just kind of like staying in bed and being cozy, because somehow, miraculously, it's actually kind of like cloudy and rainy out today. It's only like 65 degrees. And so I lit some candles in my room and I made an iced coffee, and I spent the morning in bed finishing up the rest of Long Island Girls. But I am kind of bummed to let you know that like I don't think I loved the second half of this book as much as I was expecting to. I think part of the reason why I enjoyed, like the first half of this book so much is because of that like nostalgia with like the early 2000s. But then, you know, as expected, this book ends up spanning, you know, decades and decades. And so like later on in the story, you're reading about like 2015 and then eventually 2020. And it kind of like lost that nostalgic vibe that I was really loving about the beginning of this, because we start having some like very serious conversations about like Trump becoming president. And then like the COVID pandemic is happening and things are just getting very bleak. Sorry, my camera keeps falling over and like losing balance on this candle that I have it stacked on top of. But anyway, there was this entire scene that we had to read where this character was kind of like talking to her parents about why Trump is bad for America. And even though I obviously agree with everything that this character was saying, it just kind of felt like the conversation felt so on the nose, almost like the author was like, this is how you should approach a conversation about Trump with the Trump supporter. And I do feel like the story became less about these girls and their passion for music and like this story about sapphic yearning, and it became more about the political climate that existed in the years of like 2015 to 2020 and how things always feel like they're changing, and kind of like how it felt different to be queer in the early 2000s versus the later 2000s. There was so much talk in this book about how like, wow, it would have been so much easier to navigate queerness in a different political climate, and like how maybe in the year of 2020 it's so much easier to identify yourself as queer than maybe it was back in 2005, because you know, back in 2005 there was still so much shame around being queer that people never really got to explore that side of themselves in a safe way. Maybe, I mean, the one thing that I really do appreciate about this book is, you know, the queer representation, because I love that we have this main character Susan who's kind of like navigating and discovering her sexuality throughout this book, but there's also a lot of different side characters in this book who are also kind of like navigating their own sexualities. And there is a lot of really great queer representation in this book and a lot of great discussions about what it means to be queer in America through all these different periods of time. Susan, our main character, like I did think she was a very strong character and that the writing was really consistently good throughout the whole book. But I just think there were some things happening in the plot in the second half of this book that I just didn't care about as much. Like for example, there was this whole plot related to like social media, which I guess could be expected because, you know, as we're getting later into like the 2010s and the 2015 time period, it's like social media was really taking off around that time. So like I do understand including it in the story, but I just didn't care as much about the social media storyline arc that was happening in this book. And I guess my favorite thing about this was like the early nostalgia of like the early 2000s and like the yearning between these two girls, when really this ended up being so much more of a story about Susan's character and kind of like her coming of age throughout the years, which is great. It's just that the second half of this story ended up feeling a lot more serious to me than the first half did. So I think I'm probably going to give this one like 3.5 stars. I really did enjoy it a lot, and I will definitely be reading more from this author because I do think this author is a phenomenal writer. But that is going to be it from me for this vlog, so definitely let me know your thoughts on any of these books if you've read them. Thank you so much for watching as always, and I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye!